From 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big issues of the day that need looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and no one is going to be cancelled for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters, and here's what we're discussing on the show. Boris Johnson remains. He tells his cabinet to draw a line under his problems, but have they gone away? Is Putin gaslighting the globe and starving the world of food as the war in Ukraine continues? And spicy but pricey, actor Johnny Depp's 50 grand curry in Brummie. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. What do you want to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. First, though, it's time for the GB News headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon. It's just 1 minute past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister asked his cabinet to find further ways to cut some of the costs the public and businesses are facing as he vowed to deliver on what matters to the British people. He said the government is focusing on COVID recovery, tackling inflation and rising energy prices. Boris Johnson thanked his ministers for their support during last night's vote, where 148 Conservative MPs said they did not have confidence in the Prime Minister.
Thank you, by the way, everybody, for all your good work yesterday, because which was a very important day, because we were able now to draw a line under the issues that our opponents want to talk about, and we're able to get on with talking about what I think the people in this country want us to talk about, which is what we are doing to help them.
Conservative MP and GB News presenter Philip Davies, who voted against the Prime Minister, says opponents need to accept the results of the confidence vote.
We're Democrats in the Conservative Party. We had a vote, he won fair and square, and all of us should get behind him and say, well, and accept that he won the vote. When there's a leadership election, not everybody votes for the person who wins, but everyone who votes for a losing candidate is rightly expected to accept the result, and this, as far as I can see, what happened yesterday is no different.
Opening an Opposition Day debate on standards in public life, the Labour Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, told MPs many people cannot move on from Partygate without the Prime Minister standing down.
But the conduct of this Prime Minister undermines those values, rigging the rules that he himself is under investigation for breaching, downgrading standards, debasing the principles of public life before our very eyes. There's nothing decent about the way that he has acted.
Polling expert Sir John Curtis told us Boris Johnson has lost public support.
Yesterday morning, in the wake of the announcement that the vote was going to take place, they found 60% of people saying that the Prime Minister should resign. That's exactly the same as what the polls were saying in the immediate wake of the publication of the Sue Gray report.
In some other news now, the co-founder of the far-right group National Action has been jailed for 8.5 years. Alex Davies was found guilty last month of being a member of the organisation after it was banned in 2016. Davies formed the neo-Nazi group while he was attending Warwick University in 2013. Three-quarters of UK consumers say the cost of food is a major future concern. The Food Standards Agency says the number of people using a food bank has jumped from 1 in 10 to nearly 1 in 6 over the last year. They say 22% of those surveyed in March skipped meals because they didn't have enough money to buy food. The UK's farming minister says allegations that Russia is stealing grain from Ukraine are very serious and must be investigated. Russia says Ukraine must have its ships vetted by the Russian military before it can export grain. The country has sieged large parts of Ukraine's coast, blocking Ukraine's farm exports and driving up the price of grain. International food agencies have warned that without Ukraine's grain, the effect on food security globally could be catastrophic. Major General Chip Chapman told GB News Russia's using it as a political tool.
They are weaponising grain supplies as a means of trying to get leverage over Ukraine in the international community ultimately. And we must, in my view, we've got to hold the line and support Ukraine and not weaken in a sort of appeasing moment saying you've got to go for a ceasefire, Ukraine, because food prices are going up.
Abusers who strangle or intentionally affect their victims' ability to breathe in an attempt to control or intimidate them now face up to 5 years in jail. It's a new offence called non-fatal strangulation that today comes into force in England and Wales as part of landmark domestic abuse legislation. It will also apply to British nationals who are overseas. The Domestic Abuse Commissioner says the new offence marks a significant step forward to protect domestic abuse victims. The government's chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, has received an honour at Buckingham Palace for helping to lead the UK's battle against coronavirus. Sir Patrick was originally knighted in the 2019 New Year's Honours list. He's now become a Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath, an order which recognises the work of senior military officials and civil servants.
I think Britain did some fantastic things during the pandemic. The science was remarkable. The data that was coming out that allowed other countries to see what was happening to the infection was used everywhere, right the way across the globe. The vaccines work was instrumental in terms of getting a vaccine out right the way across the world that saved countless lives.
This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Alex.
And so Boris survived by the skin of his teeth, so one faction is saying. Comfortably, claims the other. The truth lies in which faction will win. But unlike previous coups, this is no organised struggle, nor is it an ordinary Prime Minister. The resistance to his rule is hodgepodge and piecemeal, made up of ideologues who despise Brexit and those who despise Boris, and those who despise flack from constituents who can't get over the revelations over Number 10 staff breaking COVID rules. The support is equally uncoordinated. Those whose jobs depend on him, those who think their seats do. The red trouser Tories and the red wall intake. And those who regard the whole torrid affair as an act of gratuitous self-harm. What it all reveals is, for a man who had such a clear recipe and clear appeal when elected with a massive majority, now everyone struggles to really know what Boris is or what he wants to do. The magic is fading, and the brave new post-Brexit world is yet to appear. What is needed is leadership and the ineffable optimism and magnetism that has helped Boris wriggle out of many a tight spot. And it is clear Boris himself is banking on the fact that he still has what it takes. And let's not forget, this is a man who seems to govern by focus group and isn't afraid of a screeching U-turn. So, expect some big policies, some clear conviction, and some tantalising Tory tub-thumping. Because without it, Boris is toast. Well, Boris Johnson told his cabinet this morning that he wants to draw a line under his problems.
We're able now to draw a line under the issues that our opponents want to talk about, and we're able to get on with talking about what I think the people of this country want us to talk about, which is what we are doing to help them and to take the country forward. And that is what we're going to do.
Let's have his problems gone away. Let's talk to GBNews political editor Darren McCaffrey, who's in Westminster. Darren, day two of survival, or day one really, of surviving the no confidence vote. Is he going to survive much longer?
I think in the immediate term, almost certainly, Alex. If anything, and we heard that, didn't we, during the news bulletin there from Conservative MPs, we heard it from Andrea Leadsom as well, someone who's been quite critical of Boris Johnson over recent weeks, who voted against him yesterday, that for those rebels, many of them feel that now is not the time to keep stirring the pot. Now is the time to accept yesterday's result, a result, of course, which saw Boris Johnson win. And clearly the Prime Minister feels that need to move on, as he said, to draw a line under this and to focus on the issues that he thinks the public are concerned about. And it is interesting, and you alluded to it there, didn't you, Alex, that we are going to hear, I think, a whole swathe of policy announcements in the days and weeks to come. We know there's going to be a big speech with the Prime Minister alongside the Chancellor on the economy and housing on Thursday. But there is increasing pressure, I think, on taxation. There's a big section of the Conservative Party who are not happy with the level of taxation under this Conservative government. Of course, the tax burden is at its highest level for 70 years. And in fact, Lord Frost, David Frost, has been on the radio this lunchtime saying that the national insurance rise needs to be scrapped immediately, arguing that virtually no economy has ever got itself out of a deficit problem by cutting spending and raising taxes, but instead by raising the size of the cake, i.e. trying to grow the economy. So I think there will be pressure for Boris Johnson to do more when it comes to taxation, not least of all during this cost of living crisis. But in the end, does that mean that all the trouble, all the danger has passed for Boris Johnson? You can bet your bottom dollar it has not. And the reason I say that is because clearly 4 out of 10 Conservative MPs, almost certainly a majority of backbenchers, voting against the leader, against the Prime Minister, is very, very tricky territory for Boris Johnson. Can he really, in reality, win many of those MPs back? And he faces lots of challenges ahead, not least of all 2 by-elections in a couple of weeks' time in Wakefield and in Tiverton. It's entirely possible that the Conservatives could lose both of those by-elections to Labour and to the Liberal Democrats. Again, that will be a test of public opinion, of the public mood around the Prime Minister. And there is this Privileges Committee report into whether the Prime Minister lied to Parliament, whether he misled MPs. Again, that report's not going to come for a couple of more months, but it was to kind of question the Prime Minister or to argue that he did lie in front of Parliament. That undoubtedly would spark, I would suspect, another challenge. Now, in theory, he is safe, Alex, for another year. But it's perfectly clear, I think, to most Conservative MPs, is if there was a big move again, those rules could very easily be changed. So, Prime Minister wants to draw a line onto this. Many MPs do as well. Many feel the Prime Minister did win yesterday, and that the only way the Conservative Party could win the next election is by uniting, and by uniting behind Boris Johnson. But frankly, for many others, they feel that he is now so wounded by the size of the rebellion yesterday that they would argue that it is a matter of time now, rather than if Boris Johnson could sustain his premiership inside number 10 up to the next general election.
Darren, thank you ever so much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor. Well, joining me now on the show is former Conservative Minister and MP Edwina Currie. Edwina, fantastic to have you back. Now, a lot of commentators and analysts out there are saying when Prime Ministers survive votes of no confidence, their days are numbered. It's almost a slow dance with death. If his premiership is indeed on life support, is it worth keeping it there?
Oh, goodness. I mean, Prime Ministers have survived far worse than this. During the Second World War, Churchill, who we know now was a great national hero, had 4 different votes of confidence against him that were called by members of his own party, because basically they didn't want us to win the war. They wanted to appease Hitler, and that was at that time still quite a respectable point of view. Boris has survived, and I'm sure he's not only feeling relieved, Alex, and he looked relieved in Cabinet, but probably rather pleased, because under the current rules, there can't be another challenge like that for a minimum of 12 months. And that then starts to get us rather closer to the next general election. Between now and the general election, which will probably be in 2024, I would guess summer of 2024, there's a lot of work to do. And much of that work hasn't been mentioned. I listened carefully to the commentary there. But I think it's worth reflecting. The national insurance rates, the NIC's contribution rates will stay high. But actually in July, the people on £12,000 a year approximately or less will no longer be paying them. So that will be a big help to people on low wages or low income households. I think that's going to relieve a lot of the pressure. The announcements will be made in September about what's happening to pensions. And I and many millions of people are expecting something like an 8 to 9% increase next April. I think that's going to relieve some of that pressure. But bear in mind, I think what needs doing, I think what Boris and the Cabinet need to do is to get a grip on some of those issues, often involving public sector workers that are affecting us. For example, not being able to get an appointment at your GPs. And when you do get an appointment, it's not face-to-face. The rail strikes that are happening in London and some other parts of the country, which are affecting even people going to school, for example, and doing exams. The problems at the airports. There's a sense in which, this is nothing to do with the government, but the government can put pressure on those private sector employers to make sure they don't offer holidays that they then have to cancel. That kind of thing is outrageous. And if it continues, that I think will affect overall the government's standing and will be much more of a problem when we get to the general election. But for the time being, I'm feeling pretty optimistic.
Edwina, thank you. Fantastic analysis there. I'd written down a couple of questions I was going to ask you, and you've answered them already. You've been so good and so thorough. Edwina Currie, who else? The former Conservative minister. So, Boris says he's won and wants us to move on. But what are the polls showing? Let's talk to Chris Curtis, who's the head of political polling at Opinion Research. Chris, it's always great having you on the programme as well. Now, if there's one thing that I always think about the sort of nature of governance of Boris Johnson since he became Prime Minister is that it seems to me very much government by opinion poll, government by focus group. We've seen so many U-turns when it's clear that policies are not favourable. So where is the mood of the nation, and is it likely to get behind him again?
Well, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't, with any level of certainty, predict the future. But what I can tell you is about public opinion right now. And if I were Boris Johnson and I was looking at opinion polls, I'd be wincing and struggling a little bit with them, because it's certainly true that they're not behind him at the moment. When we polled yesterday on what voters wanted Conservative MPs to do last night, the vast majority of them said that they wanted them to vote for, that they had no confidence in Boris Johnson and put a different Conservative leader in instead. Voters don't see him as trustworthy. Voters don't see him as competent. And back when we were, one of the big selling points of Boris Johnson was that he was able to get things done. He got the vaccine rollout done. He won the 2019 general election by saying, as he ended up doing, that he'd get Brexit done. But increasingly, voters don't see him as the kind of man who can get things done either. And I think when we're facing such a tough economic situation, prices rising, cost of living crisis, for the Conservatives to be going into that kind of crisis with a leader who has, the public have started to lose faith in, I think is going to make it very, very hard for the Conservative Party over the next 12 months.
I mean, it strikes me that this idea that Boris isn't serious and isn't trustworthy are kind of heritage assessments of the man, things that people knew already when he became Prime Minister, with that enormous majority. Do you think if he manages to get some of the big things right now, to alleviate the pinch that a lot of people are feeling, to bring back a bit of a feel-good factor in troubling times, something that Boris himself is uniquely able to do, that he can turn things around? Or do you think this is curtains?
Look, I mean, if the Conservative Party manages in incredibly difficult economic situation to turn the, to have a successful, to turn the economy around, if in, incredibly difficult cost of living situation where people are feeling a lot poorer, the Conservatives can stop people feeling a lot poorer. If when the Conservatives felt the need to raise taxes, the Conservatives no longer feel the need to raise taxes and reverse their tax rises. If in a situation where we have record long waiting lists at the NHS, the Conservatives manage to find the money to put more money into the NHS. If in a situation where people are telling me that crime is a real problem in their community and they want to see more things being done to tackle crime, the Conservatives manage to bring back down crime rates and put more police on the streets. If the Conservatives can do all of that, then, they probably do have a fighting chance overcoming this sort of trustworthy problem that they have. But that's a really big challenge. And even at the best of times, the Conservatives would have had a massive challenge to get through the problems that they currently face. They needed to be going into this next year fighting fit. And I'm afraid to say, based on the polling we're seeing at the moment, and based on the result last night with the party shown to be quite divided, I don't think the Conservatives are fighting fit right now.
Chris Curtis, thank you so much. Head of political polling at Opinium Research. Well, there's clearly a split between the Cabinet and backbench Tories over Boris being Prime Minister. How have grassroots Tories reacted to events in the past 24 hours? Let's talk to Harry Phillips, who's the local government editor at Conservative Home. Harry, a lot of this will rest on, what the party feels about Boris Johnson. They've had the vote amongst the parliamentary party. What about the rest of the Conservatives out there, the card-carrying members, the grassroots and true blues? Can their support be yet salvaged?
Oh, I think it can, yes. I think that there's very much a strong wish for Boris Johnson to succeed and a strong wish for him to get sort of back on track with having some strong Conservative policies. But there's also a lot of frustration at people feeling that really we've got a Conservative government in name only, that it's been pursuing socialist policies and it's been having more spending, more tax, a bigger state. And I think that so people now feel, I think that in a way that he's now got a chance. He's now got a year, as Edwina Currie was saying, that where there won't be any more challenges. So there won't be this sort of debilitating process of letters going in and everyone's sort of focusing on when the challenge is going to come and what will happen. He's now got a year to prove himself and to come up with some strong policies. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg actually could be a very important figure helping him in terms of both trying to cut the cost of government and therefore allow that to reduce tax for the as the cost of living crisis, with things like abolishing quangos and cutting the size of the civil service. And also Jacob Rees-Mogg's got an important role on getting rid of some of the EU regulation, because of course a lot of the Brexiteers are frustrated, saying yes, it's fine, Brexit's happened and we've got that done, but we haven't actually taken advantage of the opportunities to get rid of the literally thousands of regulations that we've inherited that are a frustration for people's everyday life and holding down economic growth. So I would say the glass is half full. I would say he's got a good chance to turn it round, but he needs to prove himself and he needs to get back on track with Conservative policies.
You ever so much, local government editor at Conservative Home. Well, joining me throughout the show today is my presenter friend, is writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters. Now, Charlie, it strikes me, listening to what everyone said there, that Boris needs to do some pretty big interventions to get the public behind him, to get those polls looking good. But it also strikes me that what happened during the pandemic was very interventionist governance, almost socialist governance, handing money out. Is there a risk that actually this is what people have come to depend upon, the government being big state, when it goes against what the Conservative ideology is? So all the things that his backbenchers are calling for is not necessarily going to move the needle in Boris Johnson's favour.
I think you're right. I mean, as the economy isn't growing and the cost of living is going up, it's the case that real wages are going to be the same as they were in 2008 in 2026. That is the end of the Conservative Party, that statistic. That people are going to essentially have no improvement in their living situation, their ability to spend money and live better in almost 2 decades. I mean, that's obscene. And this government, with an awesome opportunity to change that, has done nothing to do it. Now, it's certainly the case that Boris Johnson is a wounded animal right now. And when animals are wounded, they have that shot of adrenaline and fight or flight. Finally, after almost 2.5 years of his reign, we should hope that a bit of fight comes through. Some of the policies that people have been crying out for, we've just heard about the twilight regulations on EU rules, some economic growth, some house building, some reform of so many of these bloated state sectors, especially health. All of this is wildly overdue and desperately needed if we are going to unleash the potential of Great Britain, as he said to the 1922 committee yesterday. Some more economic growth is everything that we need.
Yeah, lots of big mountains for Boris Johnson to climb. Charlie, thank you ever so much. I want to know your view. Should Boris Johnson be true blue, cut taxes, but also draw back some of the state dependency that people have gotten used to, spend less, basically? Or there's a cost of living crisis. Should he be putting his hands in his pockets, the taxpayers' pockets, to get himself out of a mess? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet the programme @GBNews. You are with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, we're off to Uxbridge, Boris Johnson's constituency, to get reaction to last night's confidence vote. But first, here's the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many of us today, but not for all. There will be some showers in the south. However, away from the showers, it's going to feel warm in many places. One area of low pressure is moving away. Another one is approaching for later in the day. A deeper one is approaching for later in the week to bring a windy spell Thursday, Friday and Saturday. But in the meantime, in between these lows, a lot of cloud for many, especially for southern parts of the country where we've started off with some light rain and drizzle, and another area of cloud feeding into eastern parts of northern England. But Scotland sees plenty of sunny spells, central parts of England also sunny spells, and where we get the sunshine, 22 Celsius is possible. Warm again also for western Scotland, but showers will form in places and some more prolonged showery rain pushes in from the southwest through the evening. Now that spreads into Northern Ireland. Much of England and Wales sees a couple of hours of rain, heavy at times, before it pushes into central and southern Scotland by dawn. And the cloud and the rain will keep the temperatures up into the teens in many spots, but the far north of Scotland stays clear of the rain and it will be a cooler start to the day here. Actually, the north of Scotland sees the best of the weather on Wednesday. Sunny spells and feeling warm in places, but slow-moving area of rain across central Scotland. A lot of low cloud here will make it feel on the cool side. Northern Ireland seeing some heavy showers. Northern England, slow-moving showers as well. Tricky driving conditions. Further south, some lively downpours also across central and southern England as well as Wales, but these will move through with a bit more of a pace because of a stronger breeze. Now the showers and the longer spells of rain tend to ease overnight. Thursday starts off relatively dry in many places before further rain in the west later. Then it turns increasingly windy.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, the Conservative Party has spoken, and for now, Boris Johnson's premiership is saved. The people who, in the first instance, decide whether the leader of their party and de facto the country cast their ballots yesterday and gave Boris a reprieve. But it ain't over until the Parliamentary Privileges Committee sings. Oh, if you thought Partygate has been wrung out as much as possible, you're wrong. The seven-man standards watchdog now gets their turn investigating whether the Prime Minister committed any wrongdoing, in this instance, misleading Parliament. And if they find him guilty, protocol would suggest Boris would then face a 10-day suspension that would normally trigger parliamentary recall. Essentially, a vote of no confidence by his own constituents. In that case, 10 locations are set up over 6 weeks where voters can sign a petition to trigger a by-election, which could mean the Prime Minister having to fight for his own seat. Well, GB News London reporter Alice Porter has spent the morning in Boris Johnson's constituency of Uxbridge. Alice, what is the mood on the ground in Uxbridge? What are the good people in Boris Johnson's constituency saying?
Has been a very safe Tory seat ever since it was created in 2010. And I think it's important to stress that even if the Prime Minister had lost last night's vote, he still would stay on as the MP for Uxbridge and Ruislip. But even amongst some of his most loyal supporters that I've been speaking to today, many of them have also been recognising that perhaps, given last night's votes, with so many Tory rebels going against the Prime Minister, that perhaps his political days are numbered. This is what they said to me.
In the beginning, when he started, he was doing some good things, but now he's doing a lot of mistakes. And I think this COVID or this lockdown party was the last mistake for me. He should be what's the word? Dismissed.
I think it's very doubtful that he can survive this. I really do, because he, you know, there's too many voting against him for him to be a credible leader anymore. The party's obviously disunited at the moment. And
I think he let the country down, and at the time that everyone who stayed at home and they were trying to protect each other by isolating themselves, he was partying. And a lot of people, they say, okay, vaccination and everything, but that's not all. He just let people down completely because he was encouraging people not to go out, but at the same time he was partying. And it's just unbelievable.
So Boris Johnson's still got your vote?
Always. If they try and get him out, I will not vote at all. I won't vote for Lib Dems, Green Party, Labour, definitely not Labour anyway, or even Tories then.
There were some people in Uxbridge who were speaking to me this morning. And so you've got quite a range of views there. But I think one thing that actually really struck me when I was speaking with quite a few of them is many supported Boris Johnson on a sort of national scale and support him as Prime Minister. But a lot of them were frustrated with him as a constituency MP. And I think some of that is down to the fact of the difficulties of when you have a Prime Minister who's also your local MP. And many of them sort of feel he's not involved with local issues, that he's not been to hustings, and quite frustrated with that. And I think that could be something that could come back to bite Boris Johnson in the ballot box. I mean, it's a couple of years until we've got a general election, so in some ways that very much goes in his favour given the events over the last 24 hours. But I think it's important to stress that speaking with the people here, it's important not to forget your local constituents, because it could come back to bite you in the ballot box.
Bite you in the ballot box. There you go. Alice Porter, our London reporter, getting the views of the people of Uxbridge. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, is Vladimir Putin gaslighting the globe and trying to starve it too? We'll be discussing after the break. But first, here's Rosie Wright and the news headlines.
It's 2:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Now, the Prime Minister's told his cabinet the government will deliver tax cuts to help with economic growth, vowing to focus on what matters to the public. Boris Johnson thanked his cabinet for their support after he saw off a vote of confidence in his premiership, where 148 Conservative MPs said they didn't back the Prime Minister.
Thank you, by the way, everybody, for all your good work yesterday, because which was a very important day, because we were able now to draw a line under the issues that our opponents want to talk about, and we are able to get on with talking about what I think the people in this country want us to talk about, which is what we are doing to help.
3/4 of UK consumers say the cost of food is a major future concern. The Food Standards Agency say the number of people using food banks has jumped from 1 in 10 to 1 in 6 since last year. They say 22% of those surveyed in March skipped meals because they didn't have enough money to buy food. The founder of the far-right group National Action has been jailed for 8.5 years. Alex Davies was found guilty last month of being a member of the organisation after it was banned in 2016. The sister of a British journalist has pleaded with Brazilian authorities to do all they can to find him. Tom Phillips was last seen early on Sunday on his way to Brazil's largest indigenous territory. The Brazilian Navy says it sent out a search and rescue team and would deploy a helicopter today. Now, if you use an Apple phone, you'll be able to edit and even unsend a text message in a new software update that's going to be released later this year. The company have also announced an update to Apple Pay, which allows people to split the cost of a purchase into multiple payments over a 6-week period. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Putin is essentially gaslighting the globe and trying to starve it too. By looting and blockading grain and fertiliser coming out of Ukraine's ports, food prices are soaring around the world, meaning the World Bank is pumping $12 billion into trying to stop tens of millions of people entering famine. Yet, when begged to stop in the UN Security Council, the Russian ambassador simply walked out, accusing the West of lying. Having cast an eye over the UN vote to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it was evident that many countries who abstained were the very ones likely to be at the sharp end of the cost of living crisis. Countries to whom Moscow might still be able to do deals on food and fuel to fund the regime, while the developed world freezes it out. Russia has even laid blame for the food crisis on the sanctions it needs lifted in order to prop up its crumbling economy. It's an audacious strategy, but no more flagrantly so than parking thousands of tanks on the border of a neighbouring country and claiming it's for a military exercise. But hunger risks fanning flames of discontent elsewhere, with instability spreading like a wildfire, especially perhaps in Balkan countries, where Russia is already working to sow division. Joining me now is research professor at the London School of Economics and former MOD, NATO and UN advisor, good friend of this programme, Gwydion Prince, and writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters is still with us too. Gwydion, I mean, we've been speaking about this for a while now, but it's now writ large, isn't it, that Putin is trying to create a global food crisis for leverage?
Putin's position is weak and weakening. Please, anybody watching, don't be taken in by the tactical advances that he's making. He's got the artillery to flatten any city. Severodonetsk has now been the most recent recipient of his attentions, although we gather that the Ukrainian armed forces are now staging something of at least a holding action, possibly even a counterattack. But yes, this is the Holodomor, which is a Ukrainian word, by the way, a portmanteau word made out of death and hunger. So it's death by hunger. It's exactly what Stalin did to Ukraine in 1930 to 1932. And Putin is now trying to do it, as you correctly said, to the poor countries in the world, countries like Egypt, which are critically dependent upon Ukrainian grain. So this is the next challenge to the free world. What are we going to do about it?
And what can we do about it?
Well, I think there are two things that we can do about it. When Russian ambassadors like Mr. Nebenzia storm out, that tells you that they are feeling somewhat guilty. It's what guilty children do when they have nothing to say to mummy, having been caught out telling a lie. We've got a choice, really, of, yes, we can increase more pressures economically, and I hope we do. That is not easily said. That's not easily done. It's easily said, because we reached a critical point with the Germans and the French. We know that there are limits now as to how far the Germans are prepared to go. And Putin is banking on us, the West, fraying in our resolve. I think that this is a double-down moment. My friend Colonel Richard Kemp, who used to be a NATO commander in Afghanistan, wrote a very good piece recently, pointing out the next thing is going to be a free world combined maritime operation, which is going to hold open the port of Odessa, which is going to clear the mines, which were laid by the Ukrainians, by the way, in order to defend themselves against amphibious attack. So there has to be a military presence in order to guarantee that there isn't going to be a Russian naval attack. And then there needs to be convoying out through the Dardanelles and then down into the global south. So that is something which needs to come. And I'm pleased to say that there are reports that the Royal Navy is already doing the necessary planning for the minesweeping.
Now, if Putin continues to put a squeeze on the exportation of grain and fertiliser from Ukraine, and it does affect countries such as Egypt, such as Serbia, what will the ramifications of that be? What is he trying to achieve?
Well, it's clear what he's trying to achieve. This is the tactic of weakness. He's trying now to weaponize starvation in order to make countries which are, many of them already clients, in a position where they will, as you just correctly said, in the famous vote in the UN on the 2nd of March, where they will abstain and perhaps even turn against the united front of the Western world. I don't think it needs to be a tactic that will work, because the other thing that we can do, apart from making sure that physically we open up the means to export the grain, there's something like 20 million tons sitting in the silos waiting to be transported, is that we also need to use, now that we have liberated our aid packages from being distributed for no good reason by DFID, to being targeted to our national objectives through the Foreign Office, which now includes the aid department, we should be using that as well to support our friends in the Commonwealth, particularly. Commonwealth is very much in our minds today. We know how strong it is. the Platinum Jubilee just reminded us.
And in terms of Putin himself, I mean, there's been a lot of speculation over his health, over the longevity of him being able to conduct a lot of this military operation personally. Any gossip on that front?
Well, I think there's more than gossip. There was an extremely important podcast a few days ago by the former chief of the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, in which Sir Richard observed, and I doubt whether he says anything without having good reason, in which he observed that the most elegant way for those in power around Putin to get rid of Mr. Putin is for him to go into a sanatorium and perhaps never to come out again, or if he does come out, not to come out as president. We don't know exactly how ill he is, but he clearly is ill. He's been diagnosed by reputable people specializing in neurological illnesses as having early Parkinsonian that has advanced rapidly, and it appears that he may have recently had a cancer operation. So he's probably not long for this world anyway. But the question is, how do the Russians find a way to exit from the appalling dead end into which, the bloody dead end into which he has driven his own country?
Brilliant, thank you. Now, Charlie, I'm going to sort of merge together the stories we've already spoken about. It was interesting to hear being asked by the Financial Times, President Zelensky saying he's actually pleased that Boris survived that vote of no confidence. There's a bit of a bromance that seems to have brewed. I mean, how much does Britain's part, and listening to the fact the Royal Navy are planning now to help the grain supplies get to where they need to be, the fact that we can help the Commonwealth if they're in times of need, how important is it for stability here in order to do that?
Well, I think firstly, British supporters of Boris Johnson using the situation in Ukraine to prop up the Prime Minister is a bit unfortunate that they're relying on the sacrifice and the heroism of Ukrainians who, admittedly they are supplying and supporting, but, they're not really their fighters. To rely on them to support Boris Johnson seems slightly crass, really. But it is an important, you say, bromance, I would say, vital strategic partnership. They are closely linked, and Britain has been at the forefront of the support from the continent to Ukraine, and I think that is very important.
Give credit where credit is due. If it hadn't been for Boris Johnson and Ben Wallace, this war would have been lost in the first 3 or 4 days. People should remember the famous N-Law missiles, which we supplied. Those wouldn't have been there if those two politicians had not ridden over the opposition in Whitehall, which was real, against us providing that supply in late January, February. And when it was done, also don't forget, the German government refused the Royal Air Force overflying permission, or indeed stopping permission in Ramstein. We had to send those missiles through Copenhagen and the Baltic states. So, one of the things that's happened here is that the European Union has split open like a melon. We now have the French and the Germans who were complicit in, we now know, supplying arms to Putin after the invasion, the illegal invasion of Crimea, and now they are pushing like mad for temporizing, for appeasement. Yeah. And that is a recipe for more death, more suffering. The way that we minimize the suffering, paradoxically, is to intensify the war so that the Ukrainians are put into a position of strength from which they can negotiate a conclusion.
Gwydion, Charlie, thank you ever so much. Fascinating insights as always, Gwydion. Well, what are your views on this? Should we be doing more? And does change at the top really matter when it comes to foreign policy? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews. Now, backlog Britain doesn't appear to be easing anytime soon. Nobody to print passports, load bags onto carousels, sell that weird cling film some travellers mummify their suitcases with. What is that stuff? As a result, what was already a pretty tedious expedition of mind-numbing queues, the liquids lottery and having your insides probed by a giant X-ray machine before shuffling in your socks to retrieve your rifled through belongings, has now become a form of torture. You're lucky if your trip doesn't involve being forced to sleep on a concrete floor. That's if you even make it back. But while an extra few days of hollybobs in the sun, for some, is like a kid being told it's inset day, for people with busy lives and limited finances, screaming kids in tow, it's a living nightmare. And frustrated holidaymakers have taken to social media to vent their anger and highlight their plight. We're joined by Paul Charles, who's the CEO of travel consultants PC Agency.
Hello, Alex.
Hello, Paul. So, I mean, it's ongoing, isn't it? How long is this going to drag on for? If you've got a flight booked in the next few weeks, months, should you be checking to see if it's going to take off?
Well, it's really stressful for a lot of people. In fact, just a few minutes before I came on air, my own flight tomorrow to Italy was cancelled, and I was put on a flight which is leaving about 9 hours later. So it's still affecting a lot of people. We're seeing about 60 to 70 cancellations per day. When you average out the number of seats on each flight, that can be anywhere between 7 and 10,000 people affected every single day. It's so stressful for people because although the numbers are small in terms of the grand scale of flights taking off, about 2% are cancelled every day, it's still really stressful. And so people are fretting, obviously, about whether their flight's going to go or not. You can't do anything, really, until you hear from the airline. You just have to wait, assume your flight is going, and then, of course, they'll contact you if there's a change of plan.
Yes. This is going to drag on a long time because of an almost domino effect. Those people who've had their flights cancelled need to then get on other flights, which then become overfilled. So other people have to get on other flights and onwards. And we're not about to recruit everybody we need to get the airports well-oiled and running effectively anytime soon.
You're absolutely right. This is not going to be solved overnight. It's going to take weeks yet because there simply aren't enough people available to come and work in the aviation industry. The government could, of course, open up to EU citizens, which some have called for in the industry, and help fill some of the gaps. But ultimately, this is a Europe-wide problem as well. We're seeing issues at Schiphol in Amsterdam, at Dublin in Ireland, airports all over Europe which are short of staff. The air traffic control teams are short of staff, and that's why flights are being cancelled at such short notice. I don't see this changing really for another 4 to 6 weeks. So the pressure is on the aviation industry to find and hire enough people before mid-July, which is, of course, the next peak when people start going away in their droves.
Someone is affected by this. If their flight's been cancelled, if they're stranded aboard, if they've had to make their own way back, what can they do?
Well, the key thing is to keep any receipts for any costs you do incur. So you may be in a position where, of course, you can claim any extra costs, knock-on costs, back from the airline in due course. Of course, the first thing the airline has to do is to try and get you on another flight on the same day, on the same airline to the same destination. But because there are fewer flights since the pandemic to each destination, that's proving really difficult for the airlines. And they do have a duty to try and get you on one of their rivals if need be. But there simply aren't enough flights going from many of these short-haul destinations back to London or vice versa, or back to Bristol or Manchester or Birmingham. And so in the end, people are having to make their own way, and they are incurring great costs of car hire, trains, taxis, and they're going to have to try and claim that back afterwards. They are entitled, of course, to compensation in many cases, certainly a refund, and for extra ad hoc expenses they've incurred. But it's going to take some weeks to get those back from the airline in terms of cash in the pocket, and that will frustrate passengers further.
Yeah, we'll get a backlog there as well, no doubt. Paul Charles, fantastic having you on the programme, CEO of the PC Travel Agency. Well, let's get the thoughts of Charlie. Backlog Britain strikes again, but it was almost reassuring in a strange way to hear him say that these problems are not British-based, they're all over the place, because I've heard so many people going, oh, why, Brexit. It's not, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, I even saw an Irish minister outside a queue for a Dublin airport being like, oh, it's not actually that bad. These things are happening around the continent. It's OK. And what I'm very worried about is that Backlog Britain is going to start to be excused by ministers who might say, as you rightly point out, that this is a problem elsewhere, but they'll turn that into a sort of comms line fluff where they say, we can't really help it at all, so we have to just put up with it. We should never expect inadequacy in services, be they public or private, in this day and age. And I think the situation we have now is worrying in that it could be excused and indeed kind of become some sort of who can queue for the longest game that Britons love to play. And
what is the solution? There are people saying, well, we need to get migrants over to fill the job shortages, but this is going to take a long time getting security checks. Of course, the government have levers they can pull. Should they be pulling them? Well, I think this problem existed in its infancy before the chaos we're seeing over the last couple of weeks. I mean, many of these major airlines have been managed and run dreadfully for years. I mean, many of your viewers will no doubt have experienced
trying to book airline tickets and the kind of IT system crashing for days on end. So, I mean, a lot of these places simply weren't prepared, for this kind of shock on this scale, but also aren't very good at hiring, aren't very good at managing their business in the first place. The idea that the government can fix this, I think we actually probably need to look closer to the companies that are running these aviation services.
Yeah, we've become a lazy bunch, haven't we? Charlie, thank you. Well, you've been emailing us to share your thoughts on the Prime Minister's vote of confidence. Peter says the last throw of the dice for Boris now is to reverse the national insurance contributions rise, remove the green levy from energy bills and the VAT, and also cuts the government tax on fuel. That will take him to a good position for the next general election. Jackie says, aren't we meant to be living in a democracy? So why is it that a winning vote is never accepted? Confidence vote, Brexit, still not accepted. There is no alternative to Boris. Let him get on with the job and see if he can deliver on the big issues. George says, 2 years, global pandemic, Brexit, fighting for his life because of COVID-19, a war in Ukraine. The hypocrisy of people is staggering. No one followed the rules, even those attacking Boris. He has my support, 100%. Those who voted against were never his allies to begin with. Matthew keeps it short, simply saying, the British people don't like backstabbers. Now, I have a new senior producer today with a mouth filthier than a sailor. And while his colourful language, probably about to stream through my earpiece, has kept me amused all morning, I've had to fight to stay Ofcom compliant for the past half hour. So bathed in expletives have I been all day. Well, here comes the real test of resilience, as it's time for the Daily Rant. And I will not be discussing a certain former health secretary. Oh, nothing pleases me more than a portmanteau neologism for a headline. Basically, a new word made by sticking two others together. The best ever, of course, is Brexit. And then there are all the gates: Watergate, Partygate, Gareth Gates. Well, today we have been given the term greedflation, which is some mega mix of inflation and the griping greed of companies profiting from rising prices and putting up their margins even higher because people in pain won't notice. And frankly, if it wasn't for a trusty new buzzword, we probably wouldn't. Get it in the OED, stat. We need something to replace vax and lockdown. Well, joining me throughout the show today was my presenter friend, writer, broadcaster, Charlie Peters. Do you know, it's fun. Gwydion said the word portmanteau and gave us a Ukrainian one. It's a day of portmanteaus.
Absolutely. You must be kind of distressed, actually. Had that lined up in your ticker, and he comes along and ruins it for you.
Because to me, Charlie Peters would be cheaters. And on that note, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, as always.
As ever.
We'll have you back very soon. That's all I've got time for. Come back and join me for We Need to Talk About tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 o'clock. Coming up next, it's the briefing with Darren McCaffrey. First, though, let's have a look at the weather. Things look like they're getting a bit brighter. Bye-bye.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many of us today, but not for all. There will be some showers in the south. However, away from the showers, it's going to feel warm in many places. One area of low pressure is moving away. Another one is approaching for later in the day. A deeper one is approaching for later in the week to bring a windy spell Thursday, Friday and Saturday. But in the meantime, in between these lows, a lot of cloud for many, especially for southern parts of the country where we've started off with some light rain and drizzle, and another area of cloud feeding into eastern parts of northern England. But Scotland sees plenty of sunny spells, central parts of England also sunny spells, and where we get the sunshine, 22 Celsius is possible. Warm again also for western Scotland, but showers will form in places and some more prolonged showery rain pushes in from the southwest through the evening. Now that spreads into Northern Ireland. Much of England and Wales sees a couple of hours of rain, heavy at times, before it pushes into central and southern Scotland by dawn. And the cloud and the rain will keep the temperatures up into the teens in many spots, but the far north of Scotland stays clear of the rain, and it will be a cooler start to the day here. Actually, the north of Scotland sees the best of the weather on Wednesday. Sunny spells and feeling warm in places, but slow-moving area of rain across central Scotland. A lot of low cloud here will make it feel on the cool side. Northern Ireland seeing some heavy showers. Northern England, slow-moving showers as well. Tricky driving conditions. Further south, some lively downpours also across central and southern England as well as Wales, but these will move through with a bit more of a pace because of a stronger breeze. Now, the showers and the longer spells of rain tend to ease overnight. Thursday starts off relatively dry in many places before further rain in the west later. Then it turns increasingly windy.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence.